Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today on cyber risk hellfire. Don't let your business go down in flames. So, my name is Michael Sugrue. And I'm the president of Pace Technical. I'll be joined today by Kyle Paterson from Bryson Insurance. He's the
Hello.
director of business development and culture. Say hi, Kyle.
Hi, everybody. Excited for today's session.
Yeah, it's going to be great. And what a topic we have today. Tons of things, certainly IT security, cybersecurity, as well as cyber insurance has been changing very, very rapidly. So if you haven't been updated, this is going to be some great content for you today. Before we get started, and Kyle is definitely very, very well versed in this subject, both cybersecurity as well as cyber insurance. So I'm very excited to hear what he has to say. Really quick beforehand, a little bit about Pace. For those who don't know us, I think a lot of people on this call do. But we've been in business a little over 20 years. We specialize in proactive managed IT support, managed IT security services, managed cloud. We're an ISO 9001 business, as well as for the last 6 years now, we've been a great place to work in Canada. So you can see our graph here on the left. We do all the basic elements of IT support that most companies in our space do, all the reactive services. But most people end up wanting to work with us for the proactive side of our business. Look, if we've never had a conversation or we haven't had a conversation recently, be very happy to have an offline conversation to give you a bit more information about Pace and what we do and how we do it for our clients. We also have done lots of free training webinars. If you haven't been to any of our webinars or have been to some, we do make these all accessible on our website. You can just go to our media dropdown and get access to any of our previous webinars. One of which I did earlier this year on how to keep your business safe. We went through a list of 18 ways that you can keep your business safe. And I'm going to be reviewing those at the end of this webinar here today too. But that was a good recent one that we just did. All right. So the first thing we wanted to do today was just sort of open up to a poll question. And I'm going to launch that right now. I think everybody should see this now. Just a simple one. Does your business have cyber insurance? So just very simple. Either you have it or you don't, or if you're unsure or you're looking into it, you can probably just do that last option there. And we'll give everybody another 20 seconds or so just to see. You see a lot of answers coming in, and it seems like the majority do have cyber insurance. So this is going to be good for today. Everybody's going to get a good refresher on what's going on and maybe have a second look at it. Okay, so I think we're pretty good there. I'm just going to end the poll and I'm going to share the results. So as you can see, the majority of people do. 60%, 30% still don't have it. And then some people, looking into it. So kind of about, what would you say, Kyle, about what we might expect on a sample size like this?
Well, actually, you'd almost expect the opposite, but we're kind of talking to potentially the choir. We're talking to your clients, our clients, and other people who we've had relationships with. So, it's not the most surprising statistic. It's great to see this adoption rate.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to stop this share, and with no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Kyle and get moving.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everybody else, for being with us today. It's a real pleasure to have the opportunity to present here with Pace. Pace is a fantastic company, and we'll talk a bit more about them in a little bit. And first, just kicking right off the top, cyber is hellfire. Don't let your business go down in flames. I intentionally picked a very intimidating image because it's a bit of satire, except for what that poll just told us. We know that fear is not leading to action. Here are some of the statistics that float around that most businesses already do know about today. 60% of businesses that do fall victim to a cyber attack are out of business within 6 months. A hacker may actually be in your network for over half a year before you even realize they're there. 43% or 4 out of 10 attacks are on small businesses. The FBI has reported a 300% increase in reported cyber crimes. And this last one is really big for a lot of different reasons, but there's a huge gap in qualified workers in the cybersecurity industry. And that is leading to big problems because there's not the right talent to close the gap with cyber hackers. And we know that it's not leading to action because still 7 out of 10 small businesses do not have cyber insurance in place today. And it's a Cyber Scout study. And we've heard a variety of different reasons why. And so this might, reflect to some of the things you've heard. If you were somebody who now has it and didn't have it before, maybe this was your previous conversation. Some companies haven't budgeted for it. They haven't had time to investigate it properly. The pandemic has put expenses on hold. We totally understand that. Don't want to put new insurance don't want to pay for a new insurance policy type. The insurance broker may not actually talk about it. And if they do, we do know that, they send an application and ask you to fill it out. PACE probably receives those applications from time to time. And PACE can't even fill it out in its entirety because it requires a two-way dialogue. And they just don't think maybe that there is a risk worth insuring. And so before we now get into the actual, cyber insurance, I just want to touch on this. Like, what in the heck has been going on lately? It has turned into hellfire, especially in the States. This is from June 4th, just a couple of days ago. A major gas pipeline, dozens of government agencies, a Florida city's water supply, and now one of the world's top meat producers are all under siege at the same time. And just taking a look at Colonial Pipeline, they had a ransomware attack, and we'll come into the actual incident, but just a little bit about them. And this is actually lineup of cars waiting to get gas as a result. But they transport about 2.5 million barrels of fuel a day. And their average revenue right now on an annual basis is 500 million, which puts them at about $1.36 million in revenue per day flowing through their pipelines. And so what happened with Colonial Pipeline? So hackers entered through a virtual private network, a VPN. And if that's something I'm going to come back to that at the very end of our presentation. And they were actually in there for over a week. On May 7th, an employee came in at 5 a.m., started their shift, turned on their computer, and saw a ransomware note, went to the operations supervisor, and by 6:10, the entire pipeline was shut down because they didn't know the extent of the issue. And that led to long lines at gas stations and very high fuel prices. And then by May 12th, Colonial began resuming their services again. That's not at full production and capacity. They just started from there. So imagine they had to rebuild back up their capacity. What happened in that time is they actually ended up paying the hackers a $4.4 million ransom. Some of that's been recovered because these are actually sloppy cyber criminals. And it's pretty crazy to think that they almost made $5 million, even though they weren't even necessarily good at doing this. And over 100 gigabytes of data was transferred off the system. And it was the first time in a 57-year history that Colonial Pipeline had to shut down. So even in those 5 days, assuming that they were able to get back to full capacity the day after, that's still $7 million in lost revenue. And we don't actually know this for sure, but there's Insurance Insider reported that they do have a cyber insurance policy with a limit of 15 million, which would maybe sound relatively accurate in size for a company like this, maybe. But you can see even 5 days down for them is going to cut half of that limit, and it's not even getting into all the other costs related to an incident. And we wanted to take a quick look at what's actually going on behind the headlines. So that's all the top line stuff, but this is just from April 2021 on one website, itgovernance.co.uk. 1 billion records were breached in this 1 month. And there is a lot of incidences. You're not going to see them all because it's probably going to be too small on your screen. I've highlighted a couple. Durham region reported an attack. Toronto was also hit by a potential cyber breach. That's cyber attacks. Then in the world of ransomware, home hardware was hit, and they actually had data removed from their system. So there's two sides to ransomware. One is the crypto locker. That's how we all know it today. And then there's actually exfiltrating data off a network. It's actually a dual threat because A, you can't operate, but B, they're actually holding your data hostage because now they can release it to the public. That's one of the big advances in this technology or malware.
Mhm.
Then we
So,
got, oh yeah,
Kyle, just so you, we did have a question come up, and I was considering letting it go to the end, but because it is relevant to a couple of the data breaches with the pipeline and a couple of the other ones that mentioned. So Joseph just asked a quick question. Both companies paid ransom. What are your thoughts on that? To pay or don't pay?
yeah, you know what? I think if we can actually park that question, and we'll come to it at the end because it really depends on what has happened.
Yeah.
I'll say before, if you had good backup protocol and you had, your data was not encrypted, your backup wasn't encrypted, then that's one side of the conversation. If the data was actually pulled off your server and they're holding that hostage, which I'll show you some examples, that's a whole other kind of conversation. So it depends is
Yeah.
the answer.
I would 100% agree with that. It all depends on what sort of systems that you have in place, how well protected you are, and if you are breached, what sort of information was breached. I mean, it's really on a case by case basis.
Absolutely. And again, this is a data breaches. I highlighted Chattanooga. I think we see them on TV with all the car lots. And here's a little library that had the data breach of their card holders. And this was just another one. This is the class that people often overlook. It's malicious insiders, so bad actors within your company or within your network, and rogue employees, what it's known as. So, I highlighted just one. A Calgary police officer was charged with the privacy breach of their own network. So today, what we're going to do is go a little bit into what insurance is and cyber insurance, a brief walk down cyber risk memory lane, you could say, an impact of the pandemic. And we're going to take a look at actual data from 1,500 breaches and how cyber insurable is your business today. We'll go through some questions that you can sort of do a self checklist. And what are the most important data-driven risk mitigation steps to be taking? And then the real value of cyber insurance. And if you have cyber insurance today, it's fantastic. And you'll actually see how your provider may be adapting to also evolve with the risk landscape. So who is Bryson Insurance? We are also a fellow Great Place to Work company. It's probably our proudest thing that we got going on because it's by the team, for the team. And we love working with companies like Pace that are also of that same headspace. And we really operate more like a boutique insurance brokerage, and we take a team approach to insurance. So it was very nice to hear Michael say that I'm highly knowledgeable about cyber insurance and cybersecurity. But really what it is a team behind me or with me that is incredible with the knowledge. And my role is really to connect. So we usually have conversations and then I connect you with the appropriate team members, but then we all work together to be a partner in your business. We're headquartered in Durham region in Ajax, and we do serve clients across Ontario and Canada. And we're actually in our 40th year in business as well. And briefly on this, it was a slide I was like, oh, this is quite a slide. But, one of the things that I think differentiates us is something that most companies would never really think to know is that, you'll often tell us what you do as a business. But if we said it in the same way to an underwriter, they'd either A, be afraid, or B, not really understand it. And so our role is to really listen to what you do as your business in your jargon and transfer that conversation to one that actually is attractive to underwriters. And then find the insurance company that loves your risk and operation. And that often leads to lower premiums, better coverage extensions, flexible options, and risk management suggestions coming back. Even with, in some instances, we've actually changed how companies report their revenue and earnings and expenses so that it actually fits what an underwriter wants to hear. And so then we come back and we work with the client to say, have you considered this? Would you like to do this? And we can actually connect you with different people to help with your risk management strategy. So my simple invitation is to book a 20-minute call with me. Whether you have cyber insurance in place or not, you'll see why. If you do, you might still want to have a quick chat. We'll just leave the call with a bit more clarity and direction, and it's completely hassle-free. And I just promise to leave you in a better place than when we started the call. And so that's my email there.
If I could just jump in here for one quick second, because cyber insurance is something we as a business reviewed not too long ago, as well as we've helped several of our clients also review what they thought they had in place as far as cyber insurance. And we're surprised to find out what sort of coverages that they had, and particular gaps as well. So if you haven't had a specific conversation about this with whoever your insurance person is, you definitely need to have that, or you should reach out to Kyle and have a conversation with him about it.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. And we're actually going to show a slide right at the end that kind of looks at the different coverages and show you some of what is potentially covered and not inside of an insurance policy. And it's a perfect lead-in, Michael, because cyber insurance does get bad press. If you do read about it online, you usually read bad things about it. And this quote from Warren Buffett is one that is probably the one I personally reference the most. And it's only when the tide goes out that you get to discover who's been swimming naked. And so when times are good, people are purchasing insurance, and they're not experiencing any claims, and so there's nothing to worry about if you're swimming naked, either without a policy or with a bad policy. But now with the tides going out, we're learning that some people are purchasing what they believe are peace of mind insurance, and then they're exposed and they have no idea. And maybe there's some big coverages excluded. Maybe there's some very low sublimits. Even if record, we've seen some with like a $25,000 extension for managing the breach of record keeping and being able to actually send out registered mail and write those letters to everybody who's been breached. And we've just seen some exclusions as well. And you just do not want to find out after a cyber incident that you do not have the appropriate policy in place for your business. So why is cyber insurance changing? If you purchased it last year, it's different this year. If you purchased it 3 years ago, it was a lot different than when you now purchased it that last year. And what's happening is the cyber insurance industry are starting to accumulate more data on the court from real claims. So they're actually being able to provide a better premium risk predictability. There is an increased frequency of claims right now and an increased severity in the risk with certain cyber incidences. And so, and beyond that, there's just a rising cost across the board related to incidents happening. So the response team and the forensic team costs are going through the roof. That's a big part of that $4 million professional gap. There's just not enough professionals, so they're charging big premium rates. The legal costs are skyrocketing. If you do need to repair or replace or restore physical equipment, that is increasing in cost quite a bit. And reputational damage is creating a much bigger long tail as consumers are just not trusting companies that go through this. So before we go forward, it's actually even important to go back another step. So what is the basic purpose of insurance? The basic purpose is to identify. So it's actually to bring you back to where you were before a loss occurs. And it's an opportunity to transfer some of that risk. And in essence, it's really the chance to allow your business to focus on your business and allow people like us to focus on transferring whatever risk you do have away. But it is not a replacement for implementing risk management. And that's one of the big things coming out in the cyber insurance space today. And how does it actually work? So it actually started off a long time ago. At least this is the original recorded start of transferring risk. But merchants would actually come together, and they would previously, I guess, put all their cargo on one boat, send it across the ocean, and if that boat sank, so did their entire fortune. And so they learned and realized that if they actually spread their risk out amongst 10 boats, then, if one boat sank, then that's 10% loss. And now they're sharing in that loss together, and they're just distributing that loss. And so if more of those participants are also practicing risk management, so you don't have 10 boats, but 3 of them are completely shabby with no proper risk management, you do not want that part of your 10 team fleet. And so if you were choosing today to pool your risk, that's what insurance is, pooled risk with other businesses. So you're going to share in their experience, share in their losses, and when you're doing well, share in their positive, not in the sense of for future premium costs. So if you were to pick which team you would want to be on, which team would you choose? So we're seeing cyber insurance kind of go in these 3 directions. One is the tack-on policies, where they do have that bare bone coverage. And there's quite a few coverage exclusions, which Michael pointed to before, lower liability limits and very low sublimits, but it helps keep premium low. So you get that peace of mind, like I have some kind of piece of paper in place. But you're still probably going to be managing a lot of the overall cost of the risk yourself once those limits get exhausted, if you do have an incident. Team 2, this is what we're seeing, is that there's a rolling back of coverage and increasing exclusions, but they're still keeping like pretty high limits, and this is allowing them to keep premium low by excluding a lot of different coverage, but it's not requiring that risk management, that proactive activity to take place. Or team 3, where the insurance companies are actually requesting risk management to be put in place, and they're maintaining coverage, and they offering flexibility with limits. And so, but this proactivity is actually keeping premium reasonable. So if you were sharing your losses with a team, which one would you want to be on? And what has cyber risk been like? What's the history been like? So over the so it's actually been around for over 30 years now. The first one actually was in 1989. And I wanted to highlight that because you have to realize that these cyber criminals have been evolving malware since that time. This is not like a new phenomenon. And you can even see back in 2015 how that growth of variants was geometrically growing. And just imagine as that continued on to today. And cyber criminals just continue to stay a step ahead. Although the US government has put it up cybercrime at the same level as terrorism, which I actually think that cybercrime is potentially more dangerous. We're seeing the impact. You don't have to deploy real people. You actually can deploy dangerous weaponry without physically being there. So 65% of the US Defense Department says they still don't think that they would know if there was a cyber attack happening on their own systems. And 60% or 59 said they wouldn't even know how to tech where breaches and different cyber incidents are going to come from. And so these are the people, at least in the States, that are really leading the charge.
Yeah, and I would say along with that, any cyber experts would definitely agree that cyber criminals are generally staying one step ahead, and we're just constantly trying to play catch up, just because of a lack of the enough resources to try and combat, but also how easy it is for these cyber criminals to get started in this industry and carry out attacks like this.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you could even probably imagine on your side, Michael, the difficulty of finding great talent because the pool is just not there.
Oh, believe me, it's a big challenge. Our industry is a very big challenge for trying to find good people.
And so companies, we work on 3-year plans, we work on 5-year plans, and we often divert back to being reactive, and we're always ducking and dodging instead. And so I just wanted to walk through a couple of examples that have happened where, companies are always just trying to stay that one step ahead. And some of the things that we've obviously heard talking to clients or prospects, or just businesses interested in cyber insurance. So we hear, we're okay. Our employees wouldn't make any kind of billing mistakes. And here is a case with the brick that actually happened a decade ago now, where someone pretended to be from Toshiba, and they called and talked to the Brick's accounts payable department a number of times, and eventually transferred the billing over to RBC, an RBC account, and they actually did 10 transactions to this fake account, totaling $338,000. They were able to recover 113, but that's still a $200,000 loss, plus all the other costs that go along with that reputational damage, and of course, just securing that incident. We also hear, we're okay, our employees are like family. Here's a case at Desjardins where one rogue employee released 2.9 million records of sensitive data. And one of the things to really note here is that they actually flagged this to the Laval Police Department, and it took 6 months for that to come out. So that's 6 months where customers' data was floating out there before they could really find out, was it actually pulled out of the system? Like, was it out there in the dark web? Was it or not? 6 months of people's data being there sold on the dark web. We're okay. We have strong firewalls and IT protocols in place. This DLA Piper is a very large law firm, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Eternal Blue, similar to Petya and WannaCry, you might have heard of WannaCry specifically. These guys just cut right through. They actually exploited a Microsoft Windows vulnerability and infected hundreds of thousands of computers on their network. The Bitcoin ransom was only $300, and really the flag here is the business interruption time. Imagine, hundreds of thousands of lawyers not billing hours, how much that costs.
Yeah, and this is a great example because, like, I preach to everybody in any security talk that I do, is that every business across the globe has a firewall, an antivirus, and some have even additional, security-based software. That is not in itself enough to stop cyber attacks. It takes process and procedure. I'm going to cover off on this again a little bit later on, but it's definitely a very important point.
Yeah, awesome, great. And we also hear this one a lot, and it's totally relatable. We don't have a lot of personal data, just some employee data. And then ransomware attackers or cyber criminals learn that they could actually attack other critical systems. That's what we're actually seeing now happening in the US. And a number of years ago, CMA CGM, which is a shipping line, it took down their entire worldwide shipping container booking system. So they couldn't actually book cargo. And so if you're a logistics facility, you might just be as easy as taking down the systems that manage personnel, manage the ability to receive and send emails, and manage the software that actually is used to book container transports. So nothing to do with employee data or personal data at all. The business interruption cost of that is massive. This one, I think, is probably still the largest situation or issue that that happened, but we're okay. We have a robust business continuity plan in place, and Maersk just blew up. They had 49,000 laptops that were destroyed. 1,200 applications were inaccessible, and approximately 1,000 were destroyed, just absolutely destroyed, having to be rebuilt from scratch. Data was on backups, but those backups themselves kept being reinfected every time they tried to do a backup. And around 3,500 of their 62, so 50% of their servers were destroyed, and they had to be rebuilt. Like they were actually turned into bricks. And so just imagine the time it would take to rebuild back up your operating capacity. And then we also hear this one, and this just happened 2 weeks ago. It's okay, we're too small. And I love this picture. It reminds me, our head office is in Ajax, and we're part of the Whitby Chamber. I always go to the Business Achievement Awards, and this reminds me of the background of somebody winning a Business Achievement Award. And so in Fargo, a corporate world, a husband and wife were sitting there and going through their emails, and the wife was saying, "Hey, what's going on with this email?" They were actually compromised. They were watching a bad actor inside their own email, starting to send emails to other people, watch their activity, and they were able to catch it. But that was the start of a cyber incident that these two specifically were comfortable or fortunate or lucky to catch. And so really, I come back to that one piece that 43% of all fraud and breach victims are small to medium-sized businesses. And so we don't think that those little Main Street businesses are at risk, but we are. So what's happened inside the pandemic? we've seen a lot of companies investing in their cybersecurity infrastructure, and they've built really impressive defense strategies, either working with companies like Pace, who also adapted from being a managed services provider to also adding more security solutions for their clients. And they've done this great job creating a perimeter defense. And then all of a sudden, the everybody went to home, and those perimeters just dissolved and they disappeared. And so remote desktop access became a big thing, and everybody had to move home without being able to properly protect that RDP access, which we'll come to again in a little bit further on here. And so we've seen a 150% increase in ransomware attacks, and payments triple in 2020. And so for the cybercrime industry, there is a boon for ransomware. Everybody is running to it because it's so hot right now, and they can make a lot of money. 41% of total cyber insurance claims are ransomware attack related. And it's just a series of colliding events leading to kind of a perfect storm. The global pandemic has forced a lot of people who wouldn't want to be cyber criminals to turn to it as a way to survive, feed their family, take care of themselves. It's easier, oh, I see a typo, for amateurs to commit ransomware attacks with ransomware as a service. And malware developers coded much more dangerous ransomware that can actually exfiltrate data off your database. So the sophisticated ransomware is probably the biggest problem for businesses today. This double extortion is happening where they can shut down your ability to operate while also taking away your data. And so imagine being someone like the National Eating Disorder page, where they were actually able to, crypto locker, encrypt their files, and move them out and threaten to release them if they didn't pay their ransom. So that's when it comes back to that question: what do you do if you have sensitive data on people with eating disorders? In this case, are you really going to allow all that information to be shared out into the world? Because that is your entire brand and your entire reputation that's going to be shot in one moment.
One thing also to note on that one, Kyle, is that, I mean, that's personal information on customers and things like that. In Canada, we have PIPEDA, the Personal Information Privacy Act. And if any personal information is, part of a breach, or any of that information is stolen, whether it's client personal information or even just the personal information, like we all keep personal information, names, addresses, phone numbers on our staff. Lots of people keep it in a file. Even if something like that is breached and stolen, by law in Canada, you have to report that incident, and you have to go through a very specific process of notifying the government authorities, your insurance, all of these users and things like that, that this information has been stolen.
And if you have clients in other countries around the world, specifically in Europe right now, I mean, you fall under their penalties, and their penalties are the highest in the world to people if you do have a breach of personal data. And just speaking to that, Michael, it's funny because the value on the dark web of data for data is big. There's this small little phishing campaign going on right now for people who use Rogers that's connected with Yahoo. They've sent out these phishing emails where they're saying Yahoo's ending their relationship with Rogers, so you got to click here to update your information for your Rogers account, and it will be a new Rogers email. And people are clicking it because it looks totally legit. And it's a phishing campaign. They're putting in their credentials, they're giving away their login information, and they don't even know. And that's happening right now. And I would guess that they're targeting people, email addresses that they've purchased through the on the dark web of Roger users. Like, this is an intentional campaign to keep collecting more data. And so Maze, this company I call it a company that's creating this sophisticated ransomware. they're serious. Like they put out a press release. They have a website, and they're being very friendly to in the world of COVID. And I'm just going to read this with pace here. So due to the situation with the incoming global economy crisis and virus pandemic, our team decided to help commercial organizations as much as possible. We are starting exclusive discounts season for everyone who has faced our product. Discounts are offered for both decrypting files and deleting of the leaked data. To get the discounts, our partners should contact us using the chat and our news resource. In case of agreement, all of the info will be deleted and decryptors will be provided. The offer applies to both new partners and the archived ones. We are always open for cooperation and communication. We also stop all activity versus all kinds of medical organizations until the stabilization of the situation with virus. So just get how organized and these guys are.
I think
And
these people need to start a new organization called Hackers with Heart or something like that.
yeah, yeah, they're so friendly, and so yeah, it's amazing. And what's also happened here that I didn't capture is that other people are building this malware too, but they're not necessarily building it as clean as teams like Maze are, and so the decryptors don't work. And so you might be paying a ransom, and it might actually allow you to get a real decryption code. So again, that's another thing that, again, we'll get to how to determine whether or not to pay. And the other piece that's just created a boon of new cyber criminals is ransomware as a service. Imagine the simplicity of being able to just focus on phishing, focus on getting those credentials, and allowing someone else to build the code for you that you can deploy when someone clicks on that malicious link. And people will pay a percentage of their winnings back into the producer. And so these people who have been able to write ransomware as a service models have been able to have an entire team of prospectors out there going after businesses. And those are really this is really the incident where you get into that small business space, because it could be somebody in your own backyard who knows you, trying to infiltrate your system, understanding how your business communicates, what your products are. And it's just completely changed the landscape of cyber crime. And so what is actually happening right now? Cyber crime has been really focused on ransomware and data breaches. And so this is actual data from 1,500 breaches from small to medium-sized businesses over the last 12 months. So it's relevant and real data. And it's sourced from Arete. And Arete is a incident response company who would often be called to get into action should you experience a cyber incident. And so what are they seeing? They are seeing that targeted industries are professional services, public service, which could be government or not-for-profit, and then manufacturing. So professional services and manufacturing, and then you get into the technology, engineering, telecom, healthcare, finance, critical infrastructure. But it's really the big three of professional services, public service, and manufacturing. Healthcare has been a super easy target. And yeah, it's amazing when you take a look at how many different healthcare institutions are being breached right now. And how much do they pay? So before, when I was talking about Maze and Ryuk, are two of the most sophisticated ransomware software malware out there in the market today. And so they are the ones that are creating these really intense crypto lockers that the free decryptors aren't necessarily working on, and they're exfiltrating the data. So they're pulling your data and shutting down your ability to do proper backup work. And so they're demanding very big payments, and they're able to get them. And then you can see all these are all different teams, by the way. These are all different groups and variants of cyber attackers. And I mean, these are just some of the big ones, but there is a lot out there. And so who is under attack? So here's where the method of intrusion is. And I talked before about those perimeters dissolving. I talked before about the pipeline issue. And so remote access, getting through the VPN or through the remote access process is the biggest method of intrusion today by far. Next up is malicious email and stolen credentials. So that's the phishing campaigns and the clickbait type action. And then through a third-party service provider. And then, a software or hardware vulnerability, that's where you get into that world of Microsoft Windows. And then the default credentials, I always talk about routers having admin as the password and login. That's the kind of example of a default. And so the next one here is data being captured? And I know I'm going fast through this, but it's important because there's a lot of information to cover off on. But what we are seeing is an increase in this number percentage of cases where data exfiltration is going on. So right now it's a quarter of the time where they're paying have data exfiltration, but that number is increasing as companies are getting better with their backup protocol and systems. And so exfiltration is becoming a bigger and bigger problem. And you can see it with the actual average ransom being paid. With data exfiltration, it's almost 2 times as high than without. And so I talked about that. These other companies are creating this malware that can exfiltrate data, but with really non-functional decryptors, putting yourself in a bad situation. Business interruption or business downtime is also a big question that people have for us. And I want to be clear too, this is data from companies that have access to a company like Arete. So this wouldn't be if you were just operating solo and you opened your computer and you had a crypto locker on there, and then what? This is companies that have a proper plan in place. And so Maze can take down, a business on average of almost 2 weeks, and then it's about a week, a business week outside of that. And just imagine, the cost of your own business if your employees couldn't even access their own email and communicate with each other, let alone clients, for an entire week. So here are some questions to ask. How insurable is your business today? Not every one of these need to be a clear yes, and some of these are maybe a yes and partial, and you may have some in place that you don't even know about. And I'm going to go through these quick, but you can take a quick list for yourself of ones that you think you would have to work on, or ones that are already check marks for yourself. So do you have a business continuity and disaster recovery plan in force to avoid disruption due to a network security event if you couldn't access your network? Do you have a cyber incident response plan in place? You might not even know what that is. That's when you call someone like us or you call Michael and we talk about it. Are incoming emails scanned for malicious links and attachments? If you're working with Pasty, they are. Are all personally identifiable information encrypted? Do you have a process in place to ensure critical backups? And do you have commercial grade firewalls, and are they being automatically updated? Are you using malware protection or endpoint detection and response tools if you do find some vulnerability with an endpoint? And again, those kind of specifics, I mean, if we got into a technical conversation, that's where you would ask Michael, what the heck's an endpoint? So we don't need to if people ask that, we can get into that. And how cyber insurable are you? So do you have solid backup structure and posture in place? And it's not just having it backed up, but it's also testing it and making sure that you can restore if something were to happen. And so how is cyber insurance leading a risk management investment? It's neat to see this happening because if you think about, early fire policies, we all think fire insurance is normal. Of course we do now, but we don't actually think our buildings are going to burn down, but we purchase it. And, I don't know what the first policies had, but I bet you the invention of non-flammable doorways or non-flammable drywall and sprinkler systems, all of these risk mitigation strategies that became required to get insurance came into place over time. And that's what we're starting to see with cyber insurance too, to become insurable. And so when we go back to when we go back to that data, the method of intrusion is remote access. So remote access is the biggest vulnerability right now. And cyber insurance carriers are afraid to invest their risk in businesses that are not investing in multi-factor authentication. So, I know it's a pain in the butt. We have it for our banking. We've adapted it for that. But, if I had to log in to my computer network to start my workday, and then I had to receive a text or however the multi-factor authentication was going to work, that is one of the biggest things you could be doing as a company to reduce the exposure, your overall business exposure. Then we get into the malicious email and stolen credentials. So again, it's the people who are clicking on things that they shouldn't be clicking on. It's not having overly redundant scanning software in place that maybe puts too many things in a quarantine folder. But that phishing and baiting, the ransomware as a service people, this is what they do all day. They focus on phishing and baiting. So this is the second biggest area. And in this, it's really focusing on on training your employees. They're looking for on the court training of employees and testing of employees. And then proper segmentation of networks. Now, I know these two slides are big, but the question around is ransom being paid? In cases where the backups were encrypted, this blue here, the ransom was paid a lot more. In situations where the backups were available and a full recovery was made, they didn't have to pay the ransom nearly as much. And so that proper network backup is critical. And again, what that specifically means for your business, that's really a PACE question more than a Bryson question, but it's an important question to be asking. And so these are the three big things that the proactive cyber insurance policy is starting to ask for. And so these hygiene requirements are being put into place. So one is ensuring that companies are doing phishing email training, and it's conducted at least on an annual basis. And anybody who fails the training is getting additional support. Multi-factor authentication is required, whether you're connecting through remote network access or if there's any kind of privileged accounts like system admin access. And at least one set of regular backups are disconnected and inaccessible through the organization's network. I was talking to a law firm, and they have an employee who actually takes a physical copy out every night and transports it around with her. I'm not going to say who it is, but that is a backup strategy. And so how do you bring a team approach to cyber insurance? First, it's important to think about what you're purchasing, and you're purchasing more than just a series of coverages. And again, we're not going to go too far down in this, but these are in nature the coverages that you're purchasing. They're the normal things that you always think about: third-party claims. So if there's a privacy breach and looking after all the people's information that was breached. First party, that's where your business interruption, period of restoration. So not just when the network goes down, but up to a period of time so after. Reputational damage, notification costs. Then there's the entire world of crime and cyber crime that is becoming, a bigger and bigger part of this. And that's where you find things like social engineering costs and electronic theft and computer fraud. And then the other pieces here. We talked about the territorial limits before, and just ensuring that, if you were to have clients in other countries, is your policy actually going to provide legal defense outside of Canada? Because not all of them do. And if you had to defend a lawsuit in another different country, what would that look like? And so these buckets here are the different types of cyber insurance policies. We obviously recommend that companies invest in a solution that looks like A, but not every business requires that depth of coverage. And that's really where the conversation comes into play about which one's right for you. But we know some companies invest in D because that's what they're being presented, and they don't know that they're getting that until after they have an incident. But there's a lot more. You actually have an incident response team right at your snap of a finger. It's not quite that fast, but you have instant 24/7 access to a breach counsel that's confidential and a support team. So you can tell them, I think all of our data was lost, and that includes medical records of national eating disorder people. And they will not, it's privilege access, privilege sharing of that information to provide you the support of what to do next. The incident response support services include the team that actually comes in from that forensic side, and they actually dive in and find out where is this happening, where's the breach occurring, and what do you need to do. They help negotiate on your behalf. They have access to crypto payment methodology if they do need to make that ransomware payment. And they're the ones negotiating with those cyber criminals, determining whether or not that has to be paid or not. Credit monitoring and identity theft teams, and a public relations consultant as well, to helping with that reputational damage. And so again, my invitation, just book that 20-minute call with me. That's my email address. And at this point, I know we're going to have some Q&A, but Michael wants to cover a couple of things too. So Michael, throwing it back over to you.
Yeah, and I know there's been some questions asked, and in just a couple of minutes, once I get through this, we're going to bring up those questions and answer everyone's questions. But as I mentioned previously, I did a webinar earlier this year, kind of going over 18 different ways that you can help to secure your business. I just wanted to kind of cover these quickly, but certainly anybody, again, you can go onto our website under the media dropdown, and for no cost at all, access this full webinar where I go into a lot more detail about all of these. But just going to zip through these. So these are, some of the basic elements, and then there's some more advanced elements. But looking at the basic ones, endpoint security. Now, I will just stress, I mean, I'm pretty sure everybody on the call probably has antivirus software on their computers, but there is a disparity in the technology. A lot of them are now built with next gen AI options that work much better than some of the old standard type. Again, it's just a conversation to have with whoever manages your IT, or certainly a conversation we can have. Password management, obviously making sure that you have some sort of process in place, the correct formatting of the password, that it changes with the right frequency. Spam and phishing protection. Again, I think everybody on this call must have some sort of spam protection. But phishing protection, is somewhat newer in the marketplace, and there's a few different products that you can get. Most of them that'll, help protect your people. God forbid they click on a link that they shouldn't in an email. The one that we use will protect that, as well as if somebody's on a website and just clicks on a link, in any kind of a website that's going to take them to a malicious site, it will block that access. Firewall and VPN, again, pretty much everybody across the globe has a firewall and some sort of a VPN, but how is that managed and maintained is really one of the key questions. Kyle brought up multi-factor authentication, also known as two-factor authentication. 100% critical if you're in, let's say, Microsoft 365. That has been a big source because, criminals go where all the fish are, and all the fish and all the people and businesses are in Microsoft 365 now. So gaining access to one user can gain them access to an entire organization. Well, when you have multi-factor authentication in there, it makes it way, way, way more difficult for a criminal to try and gain access. So that is absolutely necessary. Microsoft 365 web-based applications that you're using, you should also have it. I'm sure everybody on this call must have some method of two-factor authentication for their banking. One of the first places it was introduced. Backups is another one. The technology has changed significantly over the last, say, 10 to 15 years. I still come across a lot of companies that are still on old technology. And Kyle used the example of a law office, just rotating a hard drive offsite. While it can function as a backup, it's probably not in the best interest of your business. And there's so much better technology that exists out there, again, that can get you from, having a few days to a week of downtime down to literally just minutes, or, the solution that we standardized on, within an hour. It doesn't matter. The building is flattened, fire, flood, you'll be taken care of. Computer updates and patching, again, having the process in place, this is one area where vulnerabilities have occurred and hackers have been able to compromise networks. But probably the most important one that I need to touch on is, having a proactive, security and IT alignment process. Because like I preach all the time, cybersecurity is really only about 25% tools and more 75% hygiene. So when I talk about hygiene is really that process and procedure in place of really understanding what's going on, of updating, your software, your hardware. um, it's great to have a firewall, but how is it managed? Who's looking into security settings? Making sure you have multi-factor authentication everywhere, looking into encryption of data, etc. Um, but I guarantee if you do not have a proactive process for looking into your infrastructure for basic process and procedure, you will have vulnerabilities. Now, doesn't absolutely mean you're going to get breached, but you may get lucky and may not get breached. But by the same token, you'll have vulnerabilities just the same, or what I refer to as blind spots. The next area, documentation and reporting, is critical for understanding what's going on. Like we get a lot of our business from companies that are supported in what I call a more reactive based support model. And they don't have any kind of documentation and reporting. And the big reason there isn't any documentation and reporting is because things aren't being checked. Um, Companies in our space have the best of intentions of doing the right thing, but a lot of them just don't have the process, procedure, and dedicated resources it takes to being on that proactive end and making sure things are as they are, and then in turn doing the documentation and reporting. Most companies don't do documentation and reporting because they're not keeping up with documentation and reporting. And if they were to report things, it would make them look bad. So they just refrain from showing things and kind of keep businesses in the dark and just say, oh yeah, IT, it's good. Don't worry, we got it. But you as a business, you need to understand exactly where you stand, because if you get a breach, you're responsible, not necessarily your IT provider. You are responsible if personal data gets leaked, and whatnot. So the next, if you can go to the next slide, the top three are another three basic ones. We've standardized dark web monitoring, which just checks to see if anybody's ID and password combinations get stolen and show up for sale. Security awareness training that Kyle mentioned, it's an absolute necessity. You need to train your people on how to stay safe. And as threats emerge and change, people need to be updated on what's going on and what the cyber landscape looks like. And then the last basic one there, cyber insurance. Everybody needs cyber insurance, but if you have not had a conversation with your insurance person, you need to have it and just understand exactly where you stand and understand, what are the gotchas that could come up to bite you, because you don't want to be in that position. Again, if you're not sure, you can also have a conversation with Kyle, who definitely can help you out. These last six here I kind of term them as maybe a little bit more advanced features. Not everybody has or has a need for mobile device management, but if you are keeping any kind of personal or business related information on mobile devices, whether it's owned by you or owned by your employees, you should have some sort of mobile device management process in place or tool. Encryption, certainly for any kind of sensitive or personal information on any file sitting at rest, you absolutely have to have that. Web app security, again, these things will actually give you notifications if there's like multiple unsuccessful login attempts to any of your cloud-based services. This is also a tool and service that is starting to gain ground in our industry. And there's advanced endpoint detection and response. This is kind of like your antivirus software on steroids. It uses a lot of artificial intelligence, machine learning to understand and see patterns and understand that an attack basically is happening, even if it's happening in the background. SIEM and log management is is again somewhat similar, but it's actually doing deep analysis of logs and other things that would otherwise go unnoticed. So, a hacker gaining access to a network that might just be sort of spying on you, or slowly taking access of systems that otherwise might go unnoticed. Within a log and with the right tool that can analyze a log and understand these trends and patterns, again, can also alert that some sort of activity or suspicious activity is happening. And then lastly, what I talked about was, coming into some sort of security compliance standard. A few of the top ones: the ISO 27001, NIST, the CIS controls. If you did adopt one of these, it's great to have for your business, and definitely covers off on a lot of the areas that you need to make sure that your business is protected. If you just move on there, Kyle. So where we do this at Pace, we we do a lot of our reporting, especially on security and whatnot, in our Pace portal. If you're a client of ours, you know about this. If you're not a client and you're interested in a demo, I could do a demo and show you what we provide for our clients. But a lot of resources for users. It's where they go to get user support. We provide video-based training for all the users we support, Microsoft products, Teams, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, cybersecurity, etc. Knowledge-based articles, licensing management, and then our where we manage the proactive security and standards reporting, where we're basically giving our clients a risk report and letting them see at a glance exactly where they stand with their cybersecurity. A strategy tool that we use, metrics and dashboards, again, just at a glance to see exactly where you stand within your IT network. And then inventory and audit reporting on all of your equipment that we're managing for you. But if you go to the next slide, Kyle, specifically within IT security, we've identified 8 critical areas, and we provide all of our clients this dashboard. It's new, and we've just rolled it out, but it lets you know just from a glance. You can see it's dashboard based, and you can see that if you have a lot of red in a particular area, you know that you have some risk or concern. Look, these are all things that we, as part of our strategy process, interpret for our clients and let them know if they have any risk or concern. But you should have, it doesn't have to be exactly like this, but you need some means of, whoever is managing your IT infrastructure needs to report to you if you're management or ownership. You don't need to get down into the weeds, but you need to understand if you have any areas of risk or concern, what could happen, what could it mean for your business. So that's what we had to present for you today. My contact info is up here, as well as Kyle's email address there if you wanted to get in touch and speak to us about anything offline. But I'm just going to open up and pull up some of the questions that we've had. So Kyle, this one comes from Jai, and he just asked, for cyber insurance, is it applicable only within the country, or does it cover globally?
Great question. Unfortunately, most of my answers are going to be it depends. The answer is yes. Generally, they provide coverage globally. Obviously, if the breach actor or the bad actor is in a different country, like that's covered if they're breaching your files here. If the data is international, then that's also generally covered. But again, that's a wording question. Sorry, I just have to exit that there. And then again, we highlighted some of that legalese piece to it. Like if you need legal defense, I mean, that's generally where there could be some pretty big restrictions. But again, it's inside of the wordings of the policy. So if you want to ever have that looked at, we're happy to take a look at that for you.
Yeah. So the next question comes from Joseph. He says, let's assume my company has full cyber protection / risk management program in place, and one of his employees lets a bad actor in through a social engineering scam, and they end up in a ransomware situation. Are they eligible for coverage?
Yeah, and you're kind of putting in 2 different incidences in one. The social engineering piece would be potentially the transfer of funds. And then a ransomware piece would be then the encryption of your data, or the encryption plus the exfiltration of that data. And yeah, I mean, if it's a rogue employee, that becomes a bigger concern. But depending on the cyber insurance policy you have, again, right, making sure we review wording, then yeah, an employee making an error, a human error, that is one of the biggest concerns, and so that's still why phishing testing and things like that are so important. But generally speaking, yes, that's one of the purposes of cyber insurance, is to protect against that human error.
Yeah. So then we have a couple of questions from Don. The first one I think I can answer. Kyle, you can chime in on. He just said, I think this is when you were kind of going through a section that had particular stats, in some of your pie charts as far as where attacks and breaches were happening. And he just said, according to Verizon, 61% of breaches are due to compromised credentials. And your chart seems way too low. So one thing that I'll say is, Don, or anybody on this call, if you just Google, cyber security statistics, I'm just going to tell you right now, you will be just overwhelmed by the amount of data and statistics. And each site is different, and each site has, anywhere from like the top 10 type of, stats up to some that have like over 200 cyber stats. And even when I read some of these, several of them are overlapping, and several of them are based on, very, very specific information. So,
Just in
yeah.
adding to that too, so there's two parts to this, Don, as well. So one is, speaking to what Michael shared, is that those images I showed were based off 1,500 cases by Arete, like their actual on the court experience. So not surveying or trying to take third party information. So on the court, but B, our remote access is, its credentials is the biggest, because I looked at this Verizon report as well. So credentials are the biggest target of credential type for cyber criminals, because they can use that to get into through the RDP to deploy the ransomware. So it is the number one targeted type of information. It's way more targeted than banking information now. It's more targeted than medical information. People want the credentials so they could get in through the VPN or through the RDP.
Yeah. So, and then the last question that I have, also from Don, and I believe this is when you were going through some of the things like two-factor authentication, having proper backups and things like that in place. And he just asked, will insurers give you discounts for adopting these technologies?
So the answer to that is that if you go back to that slide about the two teams, like the three different teams. So team 2 was removing coverages and putting exclusions in there, but keeping limits higher for less coverages. And so they were kind of backstopping themselves out of having to pay for social engineering issues and for certain sides of business interruption. So in those cases, it's keeping premiums low, but it's removing the coverage. But if you want to actually get those coverages, if you want to get into sort of an exclusive club of people being proactive with good insurance premiums, then that's part of the entry. But if you were to actually pay the normal premium, if you were to have no proper risk management, like those three things mentioned, the insurance carriers know that you're a sitting duck, and so they have to put on a high premium. But it's hard because the catastrophic risk is through the roof. And so they have trouble getting the right premium if you're not taking some of those steps. But yes, there's still some, like, and that gives you that pricing. So it's not a discount per se, but it's the pricing that you get by being proactive, which is probably, it's kind of the same thing, just not it's not marketed as a discount, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's all the questions that we had. So I want to thank Kyle. That was an awesome presentation. Lots of great information in there for everybody, and some great insights into what's going on within insurance. So again, if you'd like to have a conversation with Kyle, reach out to him, Paterson@brysoninsurance.ca. If you haven't had a conversation with Pace, recently, certainly reach out to me, mike@pacetechnical.com. Love to have a brief conversation with you to see if there's anything we might be able to help you out with.
Fantastic. Thank you, Michael. It was great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Okay. All right, everybody, enjoy the rest of your day.